Welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Mike Luciano. Mike, it's a different time. We are recording one day later than we normally do. It's been a week since we actually last spoke about the Jets. How you feeling today, buddy? What's going on?
I'm feeling okay about the Jets. I'm going to peel back the curtain a little bit. I am not going to go on injured reserve, but I really messed this up something fierce the other day. I think one too many sets, one too many. Wow. Probably shouldn't have lifted that much at the gym.
That's a humble brag. It's a humble brag right there.
Well, no, it's not a brag because I just hurt myself out of mismanagement. That's not a brag.
Yes.
But we are back at a little bit of a different time, a little Thursday matinee for you guys over there on lunch break. So if you're with us on your lunch break, thank you for joining us. And if you're listening later on the podcast platforms, we thank you for that too. You can find us all there on Apple, Google, Spotify. We're all there, all the podcast platforms, wherever you get them. That's where we are. And on YouTube at the Jet Press. You can subscribe. You can like the stream, all that good stuff. You can also now give thanks in our live streams. If you want to be super duper mega generous, we would appreciate every red cent that you give us. But Justin, we got another full week of Jets football. This team is actually looking pretty good. So it's not just why won't Trevor Siemian play, which is what we were talking about in week 4 last week.
Oh, geez. Last year,
excuse me. That's what we were doing about when is the earliest possible date Trevor Siemian can play. We were doing all kinds of equations and what's that thing, an abacus? We were sliding that around.
That's what's going on in Miami right now. They're like, can we get Tim Boyle playing? What's going on?
I like how they signed Tim Boyle and then he had to play and they're like, well, Tyler Huntley's going to play. So like, why?
That's the story.
Like, why sign a guy if he's not going to?
It's the same conversation we had last year. That is the story of Tim Boyle's career. We don't know how he gets away with it. At this point, again, I respect it.
But we have Aaron Rodgers on Pat McAfee. Now, last year it sucked because you got all the bad stuff, all the weird out there theories that amateur scientists / pandemic disease experts / politicians / everything Aaron Rodgers can uncork at a moment's notice. But now it's just, hey, the Jets are rolling pretty good. So these interviews are a lot better. He did get in some shots at the one thing that I think isn't going swimmingly for the Jets right now, which is Haason Reddick. Because there was a report in The Athletic in the offseason that said the Jets' chaos, I believe it was total disaster or disarray.
Yeah, disarray.
And looks anything but so far. I know they're playing up for the cameras and all that, but everybody looks pretty hunky-dory so far. And Rodgers, in taking a shot at our old friend, who we still don't even know where he is, Haason Reddick, said, I think that headline, was created by Haason Reddick's agent. And I even said that when it came out. I'm like, this feels like Haason Reddick's agent being like, oh, the Jets are terrible because they won't pay my client. But when stuff like this happens, I used to think it was kind of 50-50. And if we ever see Haason Reddick, I'm like 90-10 he's not going to play for the Jets ever. Because now Aaron Rodgers, who basically is the head coach and the GM, as we all kind of know, he has that sort of power over this organization. If he's taking pot shots at you, I think that might be a wrap. And like players have had contract holdouts before, and players have typically been supportive of other guys saying, get your money. You only play this game for a finite amount of time. Get your money. Reddick is one of the few times, where the players I don't think are on his side because he's being a detriment to the team because they're out their best pass rusher. Even with their hot start, he would still be their best pass rusher. Imagine the sacks he could have piled up against Tennessee or New England. And he's hurting himself because he's now lost close to $9 million in fines and game checks that he's not going to recoup. A startlingly bad decision. But it also underscores one thing that I've been kind of jokingly thinking about Haason Reddick, but I now believe wholeheartedly. I don't believe that this is all Tory Dandy.
Oh, for sure.
Deciding everything. Because Tory Dandy is a well-respected agent who has handled CeeDee Lamb and Pat Surtain's contracts and got them both record deals or close to a record deal for Lamb. This guy knows what he's doing. He's a very good agent. Le'Veon Bell is the situation people bring up a lot. 2 reasons that this is totally different. Number one, as we mentioned before, Le'Veon Bell never actually signed a contract. He was still on a franchise tender. So he wasn't really getting fined. He was almost basically just a free agent for the entire year. And number 2, you can look this up. His agent at the time did say that he kind of made some mistakes in terms of not knowing that Le'Veon would be eligible for a certain amount of money, a certain amount of franchise tender, that could have maybe avoided this whole thing. He's been on the record saying that. Haason Reddick, I will not believe that a guy who represented Patrick Surtain and CeeDee Lamb will tell Haason Reddick, you can lose $9 million in money in a contract year when you're going to be 30, and this is the best financial decision for you. So this leads me to believe that Haason Reddick is doing all this by himself. And if he's doing this all this by himself, a guy who's, I think, felt disrespected for his whole career because Arizona didn't really use him right. Carolina got rid of him immediately. Philly, he was used right and playing really well, but they didn't want to pay him. And now not only do the Jets not want to pay him, but the quarterback, who's one of the most popular players in the league, is now taking little jabs at him. I think he's going to be like, well, why do I want to show up to this? No one here likes me. It's all his fault, but nobody here likes me. So I think right now, I think that it's more likely than not that Haason Reddick is never going to play for the Jets. And anybody who bought a Reddick number 7 Jets jersey anticipating that he would, because I'm sure some people did.
Yeah.
I can only say I'm sorry.
It's gonna be a collector's item at some point. That's gonna be a collector's edition.
It's like I remember a friend of mine who's a Philly sports fan. He has an Andrew Bynum 76ers
oh my God. Wow.
jersey when that happened. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's a collector's item. Brian in chat said I think it's more likely it was Mecole Hardman's agent who spoke to The Athletic at the time than Reddick's agent. I mean, who knows? Obviously, Hardman's agent I know has been outspoken about how he did not like certain things that were handled with the Jets and Hardman situation. I know there was the whole, remember the original Athletic report that came out back in like January or whatever. There was some like talk. It was like, oh, like Mecole Hardman was one of the leaks or whatever. You know, people were like, Tim Boyle's one of the leaks. Mecole Hardman's one of the leaks. Rex Hogan, whatever. I don't know. I think the most interesting thing that was said by Rodgers here, and I was away, by the way, the last few days, so I kind of like didn't get to see how much of a talking point this was on social media, but Rodgers basically said that Reddick fired his agent, or that Reddick's agent was no longer his agent. Now, it is very possible that this is just Aaron Rodgers lying or misspeaking or not knowing the full situation. Maybe he's just assuming. Maybe he's just joking. I don't know. But if that is true, if what Rodgers is saying is true, and that either Haason Reddick fired his agent or his agent is no longer his agent, maybe it was his choice and he parted ways, that certainly doesn't bode well for Reddick's chances of ever playing with the Jets because, Mike, I agree with you. And I kind of felt this way for a while as well. This is Haason Reddick's choice. Like this, I would be shocked if any NFL agent was advising him to take the actions that he's taken, because he's not only losing himself money. I mean, he's going to cost himself, I believe, over $9 million by Sunday. Like that'll be officially over $9 million that he's cost himself in fines, but he's tanking his own value, both in the current and the future, and costing himself a future payday in the process. NFL agents aren't dumb. I know people like to hate on them. You could say a lot of things about NFL agents. They're generally pretty smart with money. That's why they got the positions that they're in. I can't imagine any agent advising Reddick to do what he's done and tank his value and lose the money that he has, because that's also losing money from the agent. So I'm not sure why any agent would want him to do that. That leads me to believe this is a matter of principle with Haason Reddick. Like you said, he feel like he's been disrespected a lot of his career, and he probably has. And he's been underpaid for a lot of his career, and he currently is also underpaid. Like that is a factual statement. Now that is a side point to the current dilemma, because the Jets were willing to up his salary this year and give him incentives and all that, but they just didn't want to give him and they still don't want to give him a long-term deal. It's such a bizarre situation because, as we've said from the beginning, there's really no logic. Like I think we all kind of assumed this would be done by training camp, at the latest a few days into training camp, because that's what logic would dictate. Both the Jets and Reddick had nothing to benefit from this dragging out as far as it has. And that's what makes it so confusing, because Reddick is not benefiting from this at all. So I don't know, man. I think I'm with you in saying that it's pretty unlikely at this stage to me that Haason Reddick plays a game for the Jets, but also I feel like I've been wrong about predicting what's going on here every step of the way, because we have no idea. We don't know what's going on, but this definitely felt like the ideal time to get a deal done. You know, the Jets had 3 games in their first 10 days of the season. They then had 10 days off to recollect themselves and to renegotiate with Haason Reddick, or even just negotiate. Just call up Torrey Dandy if he's still Haason Reddick's agent. Call up Reddick, figure out what's going on, maybe get him in the building. The fact that it's now Thursday and there's been not even a peep aside from Rodgers hinting at Reddick maybe parting ways with his agent, and taking a shot at his agent in the process on the Pat McAfee show. That's the only thing we've heard about this. That does not bode well for Reddick's chances of showing up, because the Jets have a pretty packed schedule coming up. After Denver, they then have to fly to London. Then they have a Monday night game. They have a couple of, they have, I believe, like a few more primetime games too. They have another Thursday
night Steelers.
Monday night, Thursday night, I think later in the year. But there's not a lot of time to really, like, this would have been the time to do this, because now the schedule gets really packed until the bye week. So I don't know how this ends. I still don't know. I think there's a very decent chance at this stage that the Jets just wipe their hands clean and trade him to somebody at the deadline. And we talked about this before we went live, Mike. I think there's a very real possibility that Reddick doesn't even demand a contract from that new team. I think it's very possible that he just gets traded to another team and he's like, I don't even care about the contract anymore. Just get me out of New York. I do not want to play for the Jets. And objectively, that's one of the funniest potential outcomes, because he would be leaving the Eagles and the Jets to, I would say, genuine contenders. And I don't know who would end up trading for him, but it'd be really funny if it was a team like the Raiders or, another team that is likely not contending. I don't know. I think that'd be a really funny outcome if he ends up going to the Raiders and he leaves Philly, he leaves New York because he wants a new contract, ends up going to a non-contender and still doesn't get his new contract. That's kind of how I almost see this playing out. It sucks for the Jets, but also the pass rush has been really good the last 2 weeks. So maybe it doesn't suck as much as we originally thought it would.
It was funny, too. I think Zach Rosenblatt mentioned this about how typically at practice every day somebody would ask Saleh about Haason Reddick, and now the last one, people didn't even ask him that because they just assume that he's not showing up, which I thought was very telling about how everybody's kind of, or especially around the beat, everybody's kind of given up on Reddick playing. That would be, here's one thing about Haason Reddick that I've learned from this is, even if it works against his own best, we all know people like this. Mm-hmm. Even if it works against his own best interest, he will refuse to admit he is wrong. That is the only reason. Now, again, he doesn't have any control over stuff like that, but that future of he just gets traded to somebody else and just plays out because it's not the Jets, that might be the only reason I don't see it happening. So he can just go, well, I still want my long-term deal, even if he gets traded again. Like, you see all these, aggregated trade proposal stuff like, oh, this team, the Browns should trade for Haason Reddick or whatever. But everything has to be prefaced with, but then they have to pay him. I can't find a contender who's going to pay. Find me a contender right now who would pay $25 million for 3 more years to Haason Reddick.
No one, not even a non-contender is doing that.
And then after that, find me a bad team who would pay $75 million for 3 years of Haason Reddick.
Yeah.
You can't find it. So that would be, and that would be taking a humongous loss if he left Philly, which is where he's from. He's from Camden. He's a South Jersey guy. Mm-hmm. So he leaves basically his hometown team, Temple guy too, which is in Philly, leaves his hometown team, which is a Super Bowl contender. And with the Niners being not particularly great, they might be the favorites in the NFC, despite all their struggles.
Maybe.
He left that, goes to the Jets, another team that I don't think they're the AFC favorites, but I think they've certainly got a puncher's chance this year. 2 contenders. If Eagles-Jets was the Super Bowl, I don't think that's the most outrageous thing I've ever heard of.
No.
And he could have left both of them, and then he ends up all of a sudden on the Tennessee Titans with no long-term deal. That would be a tremendous blow to his ego. And he's willing to sacrifice $9 million and more.
Yeah.
For his ego. So is he even willing to do that? Because he could get traded and then, I'm sorry to pick on the Titans here, but he could go there and just say, I'm still not showing up till I get my deal. And then and around we go and nobody's solved anything.
Exactly. And at that point, who's going to even trade? Like, that's people, like, teams know what's going on here with Reddick. And I think the view around the league might be a little different than the view in the media. Like, I think a lot of people are kind of blaming Joe Douglas for this, and he deserves some blame. Absolutely. The Jets, I don't think, have handled this particularly well, but they're also seeing it and saying, look, if we trade for Reddick, we need to know we're going to give him a contract. Otherwise, we're not going to trade for him, because clearly he's not going to show up otherwise. Even if he gives his word, even if Reddick is like, I don't need a new contract, I'll show up and play. What team's going to believe that at this point? I wouldn't, because apparently that's what the Jets say happened with them. So I don't think any team would be willing to believe that. And it feels like we're just repeating ourselves almost at this point. But I've still seen so many people going at it on Twitter and being like, oh, well, his agent, Tory Dandy, is known for holdouts. Look at what CD Lamb and
they're playing now.
They're not only playing, but those were good holdouts. Like those were holdouts that made sense because there were teams willing to give them money. There were plenty. You think if the Dallas Cowboys did not give CeeDee Lamb that contract, you'd think there's no other team that would have given him that contract. Teams would have been lining up to give him that contract. That's knowing your market. That's playing the market correctly, knowing your value, knowing your worth, and he got paid as a result. That's not what's happening with Haason Reddick.
And on top of that, those were guys who were star rookies who have been with those teams for years.
Yes.
And the GMs want to keep them as long-term pieces. Reddick has not even shown up to anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I think that the Jets kind of – I know that they probably should have, allocated more money to a Reddick deal in the way beginning before everything else happened. But can you find fault? And again, we're so pro player in these things. I don't think you're contractually legally obligated to play for us, show up to the team and play. I don't think that's an outlandish statement from a professional football team. I don't think they're in the wrong there.
No.
So, like, they may have messed up some stuff beforehand. Now it's just Haason Reddick shooting himself in the foot. And it's frustrating because I want to see him play. I know he's really good, and I know he'd help the Jets. And he might not even help. He's not going to help the Jets this year. He's hurt the Eagles because Bryce Huff looks awful, and their defense looks a lot worse without him. He's probably not going to go just play for a winless, a horrible, hapless, also-ran team unless he gets a new deal. Like, I can't find a situation where he wins. Like, what would a win even look like now?
For
Reddick? What's more of a win just to you? One more year with the Jets with, extra money on top, some incentives and stuff like that. The thing we thought they would do.
Yeah.
Isn't that more of a win than 3 years, 75 with a complete rinky-dink tire fire with like the Jaguars or something?
It depends it depends on the player. Some players genuinely just see it for the money and it's a business to them. And that's like, I'm not going to say what's right or wrong.
Like the Jets would have paid him money anyway. It's not like they were I guarantee at some point they have told Haason Reddick's agent, we'll give you a significant pay bump. We're not going to just let you play $15 million out.
That was kind of understood, I think. For Reddick at this stage, the only way he wins and doesn't look like a complete idiot in this situation is if some team gives him a long-term contract. That's the only way. And I can't say.
And then they look like idiots.
Then they look good. Yes, and then they look like idiots. I can't sit here and say that's impossible. By everything we've heard and everything that's been reported, that seems very unlikely. But if any team is going to do it, it would be a crappy team. It would be a team like the Raiders that has some money to burn or, whatever. And it's just, I don't know. Or the Titans. I said this again before the show. DeAndre Hopkins and Haason Reddick just wasting away their careers in Nashville. That makes me so sad. Because, man, send to the contenders. Like, get Haason Reddick on a contender.
He is on a contender.
I know. And let him or make him play. Like, and I'm talking to him at this point. But yeah, man. I don't know. It's dumb.
John Mundock has a good point. He's almost at a break-even point if he is to play now. Like, even if he comes back in week 7 or whatever, he's still probably lost money on this season.
Yeah. Brian says
he still made negative money.
Brian's got a compromise here. He said Reddick earns $500,000 if he makes the Pro Bowl this year. So the Jets agree to set up a bot that votes for him 500,000 times in exchange for him showing up. Sure.
The Jets have probably offered him in the immediate future, like close to $5 million or more in raises and incentives and stuff like that. Maybe $7-8 million.
Yeah.
And he still said no. So like what? It's like what do you even want? Do you even know what you want here, Haason Reddick?
At least we know that the Jets are not going to be giving up a second-round pick for Haason Reddick because I don't even know if it's. I think it's technically still possible for him to reach the qualifiers that he would need to, which is like 67.5% of snaps and I think 10 plus sacks. Both of those things, but I think it's safe to say that those things are not happening.
Let's move on to some positive surprise because this has been a negative surprise. So let's do some positive surprises because Jets are 2-1, and record-wise, this doesn't shock me. They lost to, as somebody put it, I honestly, I know that Colin Cowherd is not a Jets, fan by any measure, but I did think he had a good quote where even with the records, he said they got annihilated by a really good team, the Niners.
Yeah.
They annihilated a horrible team, the Patriots, and then they were back and forth with an okay team, the Titans. That's kind of where they are right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of the Jets have been playing really well. Aaron Rodgers looks like not the Aaron Rodgers of yesteryear, but certainly better than any of the Jets quarterbacks we've seen in the last 10 years, and certainly well above average. But there have been a few players where you're like, oh my God, I did not see that coming through 3 games. The biggest one, I think you know where we're going to start out with this in terms of surprise number 1, because Garrett Wilson, partially through bad luck, has faced Charvarius Ward, Algerius Sneed, and Christian Gonzalez back-to-back, and now he gets Pat Surtain right after that. So a tough run of cornerbacks. So that means somebody's got to step up. It was not Mike Williams, who has 4 catches. It's Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard was so bad that last year, after signing a 4-year deal, Robert Saleh had a quote saying, well, we got him for the next year and a half, implying they're already looking forward to when can we get out from under this thing. Because he only had 300 yards and 1 touchdown. And I get that the switch from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson really messed with him, but and I know that he's been inconsistent beforehand, but when I'm watching him, I'm like, you could just see that so much. He was just so in his head. Mm-hmm. It was just a nightmare situation. Things were compounding on one another. And honestly, going from Green Bay to New York, there's nowhere to hide. The media is not as, I think, buddy-buddy as they are in Green Bay. It's a lot more aggressive here. If you mess up, you're going to hear about it a lot more. And I think he just didn't know how to handle that. They came in this year, and I know Rodgers being back helps, but it really genuinely looks like they said, clean slate, forget it happened, start anew. And he looks brilliant. Now, again, he had a couple yards in garbage time against those 49ers in that 49ers game when Tyrod Taylor threw him the touchdown, but he's got 3 touchdowns. He's been really good after the catch.
Yeah.
I've really only seen 1 back-breaking drop in 3 games. He is totally in sync with Aaron Rodgers in a way Garrett Wilson right now is not. So I'm thrilled because not only has Lazard played really well, and I know they drafted Malachi Corley, but if he keeps playing even close to this, I don't think the Jets are looking at immediately to get out from under that contract. With Mike Williams being a free agent, I think if he keeps playing like this, there's a possibility they go into next year, if Malachi Corley develops, big if, with Wilson and Lazard, and then Corley right behind him.
And then Devontae Adams.
Well, maybe they'll take Haason Reddick.
I don't know. I think we all kind of went into this year expecting pretty much nothing from Allen Lazard. Like he was a 0 last year in every possible way. If there was anything below a 0, if you can have a negative, he was a negative. I've cited this before, but ESPN Analytics has an overall wide receiver score, just an overall receiver score based on open score, catch score, and yak score. Out of 153 qualified wide receivers and tight ends last year, Allen Lazard ranked 153rd. He ranked dead last of any receiver in the NFL, wide receiver, tight end in the NFL last year. The only guys even remotely in his territory, Jonathan Mingo, Van Jefferson, Devontae Parker, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Not exactly murderer's row of receivers there. I think that shows me it's a pretty good statistic. Those are guys who I would consider some of the worst receivers in football last year, and Allen Lazard was the worst of them all. I don't know if it was a mental thing with him, whatever it was. He was abysmal. But this year, he's good, man. He's good. The Allen Lazard renaissance is here. And we talked about going into the year, dang, who's that wide receiver 3 for the Jets? Is it going to be Malachi Corley? In the summer, it looked like Xavier Gibson. Well, now the Jets are just running 3 wide receiver sets with Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard and Mike Williams. And there's your wide receiver trio. Xavier Gibson isn't playing very much. Malachi Corley is not playing at all. I think he's at 2 snaps through the first 3 weeks of the year. So it's been Lazard. That is that wide receiver 3. And not only is he wide receiver 3, he's 2 yards off the receiving yards leader for the Jets. He only has 2 fewer yards than Garrett Wilson. He only has a couple catches fewer, and then he leads in touchdowns. He has 3 touchdowns. No other player in the Jets, I think, has more than 1 in the air at least. So Allen Lazard has been Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy, which is what they kind of expected when they signed him. This is the Allen Lazard that they expected when they signed him. And honestly, you could say he's maybe been a little bit better. I think that it's a small sample size still, and we're going to see those inconsistencies probably pop up. We already saw a couple of drops earlier in the year. I think we're probably going to see more of that, but the chemistry is there. And while it's still developing with Garrett Wilson, it's very, very clear that Allen Lazard is his go-to target. And it's so nice that we can sit here because, and this was a big issue going into the year. And after week 1, we raised this concern that what do the Jets do on offense if it's not Garrett Wilson, if it's not Breece Hall? Who are they targeting? Well, Alan Lazard's resurgence has been a huge reason why they've been able to diversify their offense and target other players, target other weapons. So it's been huge for the Jets offense. Obviously, Alan Lazard has been a very important part of the team, and we'll see where it is going forward. But yeah, I would definitely say he's been my biggest surprise as well. Like I don't think anyone expected this from Alan Lazard. I'm going to pivot, unless you have something to say on that, Mike. Are you gonna say something?
Well, I will say though, like, it was a surprise too, but they're not asking him to be a 1,000-yard receiver.
Of course
Like,
not.
this is kind of what he was with the Packers.
Yep.
And the encouraging thing though is, maybe this is just me, I haven't seen Lazard really get vertical a lot this year. Like, a lot of his plays have been on shorter plays. And that was part of his Green Bay appeal, was he's a big guy, he's a vertical target, he's a red zone guy. Like that, that was part of what made him go with the Packers. So we haven't even seen that yet. So if that's still there,
yeah,
sky's the limit.
And that's a lot of that's because the Jets haven't really gone vertical a ton. Like aside from the only times they've really gone vertical, I think Lazard had that one up the seam, the touchdown in week 1. But for the most part, it's been very quick passes, like Rodgers' little back shoulder to Mike Williams, tossing up for him. You know, the little toss up to Garrett Wilson, where he beat his man off press and just kind of Rodgers threw it up where only Wilson can catch it. Like, they're not really doing long developing downfield plays, which has been a design of the offense. It'll be interesting to see if they trust the pass protection enough moving forward to add that element to the offense. And once you do, I mean, you have Mike Williams, who's always been one of the best deep threats in the entire NFL. Alan Lazard can do that, and he did it a lot in Green Bay. And Garrett Wilson is I mean, he's got the separation skills and the speed to be a dangerous player downfield as well. So I'm really interested to see if they start implementing more of those plays into the offense. Speaking of the offense, and speaking of Allen, I want to talk about another player who has definitely been a huge surprise for the Jets this year. That's been Braelon Allen, because I don't think a lot of Jets fans expected a ton from this rookie class, at least early in 2024. Luciano was not expecting to play. Now he's playing at right tackle with Morgan Moses hurt, but he entered the year as a backup. Malachi Corley, slow summer, does not look like he's going to be a significant part of the team. So it was kind of getting a little questionable, like who's actually going to play a role this year from that rookie class. It's been Braelon Allen. Braelon Allen has been a revelation for this Jets offense. He is, I mean, again, PFF grades, we've said this before, take it with a grain of salt. He is currently PFF's #1 graded running back by rushing grade. I believe James Cook is the only running back with a higher just overall grade than Braelon Allen. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry on 19 attempts, 4.11 yards after contact per attempt, which is top 5 in the NFL. And you don't even need the stats. He's the real deal. Just watch him play. I don't think it's a stretch to say he'd be starting on quite a few teams right now. Again, it's a small sample size, but based on what we've seen, I could already name more than a handful of starting running backs that Braelon. I would rather have Braelon Allen than over them. He's been the real deal, and he's been a huge, again, reason, along with Alan Lazard and Tyler Conklin, that the Jets have been able to diversify their offense and get other guys involved. They've been running a lot of 2 running back sets, which it seems like Nathaniel Hackett was pretty reluctant to do early in the season. I believe, I forget who gave that quote, but it was apparently Rodgers that pushed him and said, hey, why don't we get these guys on the field together? The Jets have been doing that. It's been huge for the offense. And it's been amazing to see Braelon Allen. And again, youngest player in the entire NFL, 20 years old, doesn't turn 21 until the end of January.
Ryan Olsen with a comment quick, is Malachi getting runs? Haven't seen him out there. He has single-digit snaps. I think
he has, 2 or 3 snaps this year.
2 or 3 snaps. Yeah, if you're that far behind Xavier Gibson when you were supposed to be this immediate play, that's concerning. But getting back to the positives, taking Allen was a bit of a gamble, because the first 2 years at Wisconsin, he looked like RB1 in this class. Mm-hmm. Big, strong, fast, powerful, runs hard. Then last year happens. They switch from old school Wisconsin I formation power stuff to basically the air raid. And that's not his game, and he struggled. It's a lot more going horizontal. He's a north-south, I'm going this way, get out of my way kind of runner. Mm-hmm. The Jets took a gamble saying we could coach those first 2 years back into him. And I got to give Joe Douglas credit, who, by the way, has now hit on 2 running backs. Seems to know he has kind of a thing for running backs. You could draft him pretty well, can scout him pretty well. They got this guy running so violently. Like, I bring that play up a lot because it's one of my favorite 1-yard runs I've ever seen. The New England game, a corner's coming right on, head on. Boom, lowers his shoulder, just bounces off him, turns a loss of 4 into a 1-yard gain. Michael Carter's not doing that. Israel Abanikanda is not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Davis, I like. He's not doing that, I don't think. He's a guy who there were some concerns about his receiving, as there normally are with big backs like this. But the Jets haven't really asked him to do too much. They gave him a very limited role. Go and execute. We'll give you like 8-9 touches a game. Go run hard when you're in the game. And he's done it. And he's blocked well. I got to give him that. So, Braelon Allen, for a late fourth-round pick, about as much of an immediate impact as a late fourth-round pick can possibly have. I don't know what's going to happen contract time-wise with Breece, but I want to see this duo kept together as long as possible because it really is, even though Breece is big too, it really is like an old-school Thunder and Lightning, probably not this level, but like a Chris Johnson, Lendale White kind of thing where you get this big bruising back in Allen and then quick, speedy Hall breaking off the big runs. Even with Rodgers, that's going to be the bread and butter of the offense.
I don't think it's crazy to say they can get to that level. I think we're already talking about it now, like as this is being one of the most talented backfield duos in the NFL. It's gonna be tough to like beat out a Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery duo because that's probably the best running back duo in the NFL right now. I'd also give a shout out to Raheem Mostert if he's healthy and Devon Achane because they're also really good. But I think in a few weeks we might be talking about this as top 5 running back duo in the NFL, and I don't think it's crazy to say they're approaching that territory already.
John Mundock, they look like 1A and 1B.
Yeah, they do.
Especially because Hall has been okay, but not amazing.
Yeah,
I think to start the year.
Good. He's been good, but Braelon Allen's definitely stolen some of the thunder for sure.
Yeah, well, they haven't really lost anything with Hall not being kind of what he was last year because Allen's been able to fill in so well. But looking back at this defense, I'm hesitant to call him a surprise because I expected this. But Will McDonald, if there was ever a time, I know that some people didn't like the pick, man, and I know that some people still don't love his long-term potential, but they asked him to step up with Haason Reddick, and he has more than answered the call. Now, he has benefited from Titans, not a great offensive line, Patriots, not even a functional. I don't think they had 5 NFL players on that line when they played the Jets. Now, he's benefited from that, but 5 sacks in basically 2 games. The pressure rate is kind of okay, but from true pass rush sets, I believe only Aiden Hutchinson and maybe one other guy from just true pass rush sets are better than him. And going back to last year, he's getting about a sack every 20 true pass rush snaps.
Yeah.
If you go back to last year, which is an insane rate. And you see a lot of the things that Robert Saleh, clearly this was a Robert Saleh pick, because you said all along, Robert Saleh going, I can fix this guy. You see the speed, you see the bend, like the way he can move, like when an offensive tackle's pushed up on him, it's freaky. And he's an older player, so there were some concerns about like when's he going to show it. He's showing it. I still don't think this is necessarily they don't need Haason Reddick, or Haason Reddick wouldn't have been as good as this kind of thing, but if Haason Reddick had 5 sacks in 3 games, we'd be saying, greatest trade acquisition ever, Joe Douglas. And Will McDonald's done that. I don't think there are as many people clamoring for Dalton Kincaid right now because this is what they thought he'd be when they drafted him out of Iowa State.
Yeah. I feel like I've been designated as like the Will McDonald hater, and I don't want that to be true because I've been very impressed with what we've seen through the first few weeks. This is better than I don't know if it's better than I expected. I mean, the sack production is obviously better, but I don't think the sack production is necessarily indicative of how well he's played. I think he's been very good. I think he's far and away, very clearly now, especially with Jermaine Johnson hurt, the best edge rusher on this roster. Obviously, Haason Reddick is not there. I don't think that's a crazy statement, and it shouldn't be because the competition isn't exactly fierce. His pressure rate is around like 17th, 18th in the league. He's second in sacks. I want to say, I do think he's been very good, and I have been impressed. But I want to be objective and say that while this is good, I'm not worried, but I wouldn't expect this level of sack production to keep up. And that's not me hating. I'm just saying he has 10 pressures and 5 of them resulted in sacks. Of those 5 sacks,
Well, I also don't think he's going to get 20 sacks this year. But
of course. But of those 5 sacks, one of them was unblocked. One of them was a cleanup. Another was a spy. Like he wasn't even rushing a passer. And another was Will Levis just tripping over him. That's 4 right there. So it's like he's been good. And I think that he's also had plays where he hasn't gotten sacks, where he's made a big impact.
There were at least 2 or 3 in that Patriots game.
Yeah, I
was like right in Brissett's face and he gets it out.
I want to reel in, and I also think he's been pretty bad in run defense too. So I just want to reel in the hype train and say that I'm happy that he's playing well. And honestly, I've just been mostly more surprised just by the overall pass rush and how productive they've been, given the loss of Jermaine Johnson, even the offseason losses of John Franco Myers and Bryce Huff, and now not having Haason Reddick. Just the overall pass rush being as good as they have been the last 2 weeks has been very encouraging. And Will McDonald is obviously a huge part of that as their best true pass rusher and their best edge rusher. I just want to reel it in. And if he is making a bigger impact, I will gladly admit, like, hey, he's doing that. I think he has been good. I don't think he's been great. And I think he's getting put in the great conversation right now where I'm like, all right, look, it's 3 weeks. He's gotten a few, I don't want to say lucky sacks, but I just don't think his sack production is indicative of how well he has played. I think he's been good, not great.
Well, not every, TJ Watt's got 20 sacks. Not all of them is beat the right tackle, kill the quarterback. Everybody's going to have, cleanup sacks and coverage sacks and stuff.
Sure. And it's just a lot of it comes down to luck. Like, again, look at like Vic Beasley's like 11, 12 sack year, whatever that was. That was a
15.
Crazy. Whatever it was. Kayvon Thibodeau last year. Kayvon Thibodeau was below average in pressure rate with like 11 and a half sacks. It's luck at that point. It's like, and there is a skill to sacking a quarterback. And I think that's something, honestly, the Jets have been kind of bad at in recent years, where it's like they get a lot of pressures and they don't always clean up the sacks, whether it's, comes down to their over aggressive tendencies, their missed tackles, whatever it is. I think Will McDonald has been very good with that, especially that sack against Will Levis. They basically won in the game. Like, he dragged down Will Levis with one arm. That's not luck. Like, that's a play right there that a lot of guys only get a pressure on. Will McDonald got a sack. So I don't want to just make it seem like I'm saying that all sacks are just luck. That was his most impressive play that he's made. But all that being said, I've been impressed by Will McDonald. And I also fully agree with Robert Saleh when Robert Saleh says that he doesn't even believe he scratched the surface of his potential. I agree, because I think there's a real possibility that Will McDonald is a more productive or a more efficient pass rusher as the year goes on, but his sack numbers die down and the sack numbers kind of fall off. And if that happens, I'll be the first one on here saying, hey, look, he's playing better now, even if the sacks aren't there. I'll be the first one to say that. But I think he's been good, and I've also been impressed with him. I don't want it to come across as if I'm hating. I just want to give credit when I think the full credit is deserved. But I agree with you. I didn't expect him to have 5 sacks, to be second in the NFL in sacks through 3 weeks. So I am surprised by that too.
It feels very almost Belichick-y, where they let the homegrown guy, Bryce Huff, go. And it's, how could they let that go? And then internal replacement slides up is great. I don't think Philly has seen a $51 million player in Bryce Huff. And again, I know it would work better here probably just scheme-wise, but like you got to have more than 1 tackle in 3 games.
Yes, as Brian says, as long as he's not Aaron Maben. I already saw after the first game where McDonald had a quiet game, I already saw people being like, oh, he's Aaron Maben. And I'm like, are you serious? First of all, Will McDonald had a sack and a half last year, so he's already not Aaron Maben, who had no sacks.
3 sacks last year, Will McDonald.
3 sacks, I'm sorry. And then he had no sacks, or Aaron Maben had no sacks with the Bills. Had that one weird year with the Jets. But yeah, no. Will McDonald, I think it's very clear to say that Will McDonald, to quote Buffalo Jets fan on Twitter, Will McDonald is good at football. Will McDonald is good. And I think that is the bigger takeaway. Honestly, I've been even more surprised. I'll give a shout out here before I get into my last guy I'm talking about. Javon Kinlaw, I think, has been killing it. I think Kinlaw's been good. I was a little concerned going into the year that he would be a downgrade over Quentin Jefferson, and I said that multiple times because throughout his career, he hasn't been as good as Jefferson. I think he's been better as a run defender. I don't think he's been particularly good, but Jefferson was very bad in run defense. And I think he's been just as productive, if not better, as a pass rusher. I thought Kinlaw has been very good. And just overall, the pass rush has very much surprised me through 2 weeks. And again, part of that is they played a Patriots offensive line that did not belong on a football field. I mean, they were starting guys they just picked up off the street. They had an already bad offensive line, was just riddled with injuries. So that's part of it. We'll see if they can sustain it moving forward. But I'll give a shout out to Kinlaw and just the pass rush. Last guy I want to talk about before we get into our Broncos preview. I made a prediction when we were doing our bold Jets predictions going into the year. One of those predictions was that Joe Tippmann would be the Jets' best offensive lineman by the end of the year, or maybe the second best. I think I hedged my bets a little bit there. Through 3 weeks, he's been their best offensive lineman. And the entire offensive line as a whole has impressed, especially in pass protection. They've been top 3 unit probably in pass protection. Part of that is they're getting the ball out very quickly. But Tippmann specifically has been excellent. I just had to say, here we go. This past game, another great game from him, 85.8 PFF grade, only allowed 1 pressure. I believe he's allowed 2 pressures all year. He's now PFF's 3rd highest graded center in the entire NFL. I believe that's behind Creed Humphrey and Eric McCoy, who unfortunately was just placed on IR by the Saints. Tippmann's having a borderline all-pro season. 3 weeks, very early, but we're seeing that second-year breakout from him that I'm not shocked at all we're seeing, because we saw the steady growth from him last year, despite the fact that he was jumping around from multiple positions, played guard a lot in the summer. When he first got thrown into the starting lineup was like week 6 or 5 or whatever it was. He was playing guard. Then he moves over to center after Connor McGovern gets hurt. So he was moving around a bunch. Not only that, he was playing with a turnstile next to him in Laken Tomlinson and a collage of practice squad right guards, whether it was Xavier Newman, Chris Glazer, whoever they were throwing out there at right guard that he was being forced to start alongside. And he's still impressed and still improved as the year went on. So I'm not shocked that we're seeing this second-year breakout. I didn't expect to see top 5 center territory and top 5 center conversation from Tippmann, but I'm not shocked that we're seeing this surgence in his play, for lack, I don't think that's even a word, but this surge in his caliber of play. Joe Tippmann's been excellent, and I think we're already forgetting about the conversations we had last month about the snap issues, because they have not been an issue at all. The entire offensive line deserves a lot of credit, but I specifically wanted to shout out Joe Tippmann because I thought he's been excellent through 3 weeks.
Amazing what has to happen when, as a center, you don't have to basically call everything because Zach Wilson's back there and Aaron Rodgers can also. So he was a rookie center having to basically call all the protections, identify all these guys. That's a lot for a rookie.
Yep.
And then you had to block the guy. Now you get Aaron Rodgers, who takes some of that off your plate, just focus on blocking. Talking about the offensive line, it's funny. Like, if you look at some of the numbers, oddly enough, like, they've all been good. The worst of the 5 might be like Tyron Smith.
Yeah, Moses. I think Moses has been a little shaky too.
A little, but again, like they're all still above average.
Yeah, Smith had
the interior especially.
Yes.
Can you imagine a bigger upgrade? AVT, I know he really was bad against San Francisco, but those last 2 games,
yep,
terrific. Tippmann, terrific. John Simpson,
he's been good.
Now, I know you had some doubts about him in the offseason because he basically only had the 1 year with Baltimore, and before that he was not only bad, but like he can't even play bad with the Raiders. So which John Simpson are we getting? We got the Baltimore guy. He looks like he's improved. And all the improvements were not just Fugazi a little bit. As Ryan Olsen puts out, per Football Guys, which is okay stat-wise, number 2 pass blocking O-line and number 13 run blocking. What were they last year? 32nd and everything?
Pretty much. That's an insane. And again, I think we talked about this. I feel like I've talked about this on the show. And Joe Douglas deserves a lot of blame for some ways he's handled the offensive line in the past. Just in a vacuum, what he did this offseason, bringing in 3 new starters on the budget that he did, taking an offensive line that was, I would say, consensus bottom 3 in the NFL last year. And I know they were beat up with injuries. That was a big part of it. But consensus bottom 3 offensive line in the NFL to right now, you could argue
the 2 healthy guys were 2 of the worst, and Becton and Laken Tomlinson.
Yeah, you could argue right now the Jets have a top 5 offensive line through the first 3 weeks, and I don't think that's a crazy statement. I think it's, I would say, not questionable. They have a top 10 offensive line based on what we've seen through the first 3 weeks of the season. So I just shout out Joe Douglas for the work he did with the offensive line this offseason, getting Tyron Smith in here on a budget, trading for Morgan Moses. By the way, that Morgan Moses trade sort of ended up, it's so funny looking back on how like draft day trades work and how it ends up playing out. That Morgan Moses trade, they ended up moving down in the 4th round. You know who they ended up picking with that 4th round pick?
Braelon Allen.
Braelon Allen. And it's so weird. I did a little deep dive on that. That pick even existed in the first place because Ben Powers, who was a guard for the Ravens, had a breakout 2022
season. He's on the Broncos now.
Right. He had a breakout 2022 season, got paid by the Broncos. As a result, the Ravens get a comp pick that they end up sending to the Jets in the Morgan Moses trade, and the Jets draft Braelon Allen. It's just crazy how somehow Ben Powers having a breakout 2022 season sort of leads to the Jets drafting Braelon Allen.
And I believe they traded down for that pick and got TJ Tampa, who I loved as a prospect, but I don't think he hasn't really played much of a role yet. So
yeah,
basically TJ Tampa for Morgan Moses and Braelon Allen.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, hell of a trade. So moving on, before we get into our Jets-Broncos preview, I know Justin has some words for our good friends over at Underdog.
That's true, because this is the second week we're now doing this. We are partnering with Underdog Fantasy this season. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. You could win up to 1,000 times your money by just choosing higher or lower on your favorite player stats, touchdowns, passing yards, and more. Last week was the first week that I did an Underdog Fantasy. I'm a bad podcast host, and I have not made my picks this week yet. Last week, unfortunately, I did not win. I did a 3 leg whatever pick'ems thing. One of them was a free pick that you kind of get each week, which was Aaron Rodgers over point or higher, I should say, than 0.5 total yards. He, of course, got that. I also picked Breece Hall higher 0.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns. He did get that. Unfortunately, I mean, I guess fortunately for the Jets, I picked higher 65.5 rushing yards for Ramondre Stevenson. He did not get that because the Jets were better than I expected in run defense. So unfortunately, I did not win, but I will be making my picks again. And I don't know, maybe I might do it for tonight's game, the Giants-Cowboys game, so I can have another rooting interest. But making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with the promo code PRESS, that's PRESS, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy promo code PRESS to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 and older, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 and older in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, you can call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369. All right, Mike, let's talk Jets.
Don't say we didn't do nothing for you in case you have some gambling problems, because
we're helping.
You had all those numbers, man.
I tried. I did my best. Now let's talk Jets-Broncos.
Let's talk Jets-Broncos. A game that I know that people go, oh, Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson's not going to play. So the main story is going to be Bo Nix. And no touchdowns, 4 picks, and he looked really, really bad his first 2 games. But you could write that off if you're a Broncos fan as Seattle, who has not allowed a 150-yard passer this year, and Pittsburgh, maybe the best defense in the league. Boom, boom, right off the bat. Then he plays Tampa Bay, who I still think is an okay defense. Looked pretty good.
He did.
Pretty good, I got to say. Like, I don't think he'll be like a high-end quarterback, but like there's something there. I don't think it's like a complete total wash. Like, I think there's something there where he could be successful. He's very good at avoiding pressure, has been going back to Auburn, going back to Oregon. That's probably always been his best trait, is avoiding pressure. And he's very accurate. You give him an open guy, he'll hit him. Here's where I'm concerned, though, for young Bo Nix against this Jets defense, without Haason Reddick, as it may be. I'm going to read left to right, Justin, their offensive line, and you tell me what you think.
Okay.
Garrett Bowles.
Solid.
Ben Powers.
Solid.
Not living up to that contract, though.
No, but he's a starting caliber guard.
Luke Wattenberg.
I will be completely honest and say I've never heard. I don't know who that is. I honestly don't.
You've never heard of 2022 5th-round pick Luke Wattenberg?
What school did he go to? I don't remember him in the
Washington.
draft. I don't even remember him in the draft process. That's crazy. I'm embarrassed.
Right guard Quinn Miners. He's good.
Oh, yeah. Quinn Miners is good.
Right tackle Mike McGlinchey is hurt right now.
Right.
So do you know who will start at right tackle?
I saw it was a former undrafted guy. I forget his Alex something, right?
I could give you now until the end of time, and you will not guess it correctly. Alex Palczewski.
Yeah. I've seen that name only because I knew he was starting in place of McGlinchey. But I didn't know he was.
How many games has he started in the NFL? Well, that's a good question. 1.
Yeah, I was going to guess 1.
And he goes up against this Jets defensive line. So Will McDonald may not beat the backup merchant allegations, but I expect another big game from him.
Their backup O-line is awful, too. Matt Pert is probably their best backup offensive lineman, the former Giant. Oh, my goodness.
Well, I mean, Denver did not go into the year expecting to be particularly.
No, still. Jesus, man.
Yep. And here's a good point that Ryan Olsen brings up that I think is going to be one of the keys to this game. I was just going to get to it, but Ryan beat me to the punch here. The Jets D changed it up and going blitz heavy against the Patriots. I wonder if they do the same to Knicks. I bet they do.
They should.
Now, they did it with Brissett because even though Brissett's a veteran who can get the ball out quick enough, they were just betting on we're going to get there so fast you're not going to have time to get the ball out. And they were right. Now, Denver, I bet they're just going to say, you know what, young quarterback, 4th game on the road, MetLife, that place was amped up. I don't think it'll be that level of amped up, but I think it'll still be a pretty tough environment for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think they try and mix things up. Young quarterback, confuse him with different coverages. They have enough horses there on defense to, even with Nick's improving and with guys like Josh Reynolds playing really well, I don't think that they're necessarily going to have the firepower to go up against this Jets defense unless Nick's just plays out of his mind.
It's crazy. He still doesn't have a passing touchdown. He's like, he had 1 rushing touchdown last week, but he's 0 touchdowns in the air and 4 interceptions.
Well, he played okay last week.
So he did. He played well. Like, that's not indicative. He played the first 2 weeks were brutal, but he played very well last week. I'm looking at his splits here. Interestingly, he's actually performed pretty well against the blitz. His completion percentage is over 61%, averaging, 5.8 yards per attempt, which, believe it or not, is his highest split.
And he's doing this with, I haven't even mentioned this. Do you know Bo Nix is their leading rusher?
That's not.
And he has 107 yards.
Yeah, that's not. He had a long run a couple weeks ago, and then last week I believe he rushed for like 40-something yards. But yeah, the difference here though, so he's performing well against the blitz, but not when he's under pressure. So when the Broncos pick up the blitz, it's going well. What's his time to throw in this stuff? So his time to throw is very high, specifically when under pressure. So it seems like he's creating a lot of this pressure for himself. When under pressure, his time to throw is 3.47 seconds, which is very bad. He is completing 44% of his passes when under pressure and averaging 4.5 yards per attempt. That's very bad. Also, again, this is PFF numbers, take it as they will. He has 0 big time throws when under pressure, but 4 when kept clean. So when you give him a clean pocket, he's been actually able to perform decent. 72% completion percentage is very good. Only 5.7 yards per attempt is not crazy.
And Sean Payton's always been good at high completion percentage.
He has. And that's also something I think they've been trying to work on too, is that Sean Payton's offense is remarkably complex, like incredibly complex, especially for a young quarterback. And I know that that's something they tried to work on going into week 3, was kind of simplifying it a little bit, because Bo Nix, I think people expect him to be one of the more NFL ready quarterbacks going into the NFL, because
he's 31 years old.
I was literally about to say he's already 35, so that's going to be the case. But
what was the dude from Florida State?
Wait,
won the Heisman.
Dude, I don't know why my first thought was Everett Golson. Remember him?
Oh yeah, Notre Dame. Chris Wenke.
Oh yeah,
he's like a 29-year-old rookie.
Yes.
And then he won the Heisman playing against 19-year-olds at 28. I'm like, that's not fair.
Brandon Weeden as well. It was different because
Brandon Weeden, yep.
But yeah, some people expected that, but he's still a rookie quarterback, and you still have some growing pains. So they tried to simplify the offense, and I think they did that a lot. Weirdly, Tyler Beatty was Denver's leading rusher last week. I don't know where that came from. I think they had a couple of was Javonte Williams banged up in that game, or were they just garbage time giving it to Beatty?
Little column A, little column B. Javonte Williams has 52 yards in 3 games this year.
Yeah, he's not particularly good. Tyler Beatty, former Raven, very fast. Not much else.
Mizzou. Shout out Mizzou.
From Missouri, yeah. But yeah, I do think on the point of blitzing Bo Nix, they're definitely going to do that a lot this week, and they should, because it seems like when he is under pressure, if you get him under pressure and get him making dumb decisions, you might get some Will Levis plays from him where it's like, oh boy, what are you doing, Bo? What are we doing here? And I think the Jets are going to try and capitalize on that. And if they're going to find success on defense this week, which, let's be honest, they should against a Broncos offense that is not particularly good, even though they showed signs of life last week, they're going to have to get pressure on Bo Nix. And I feel pretty good about their chances of doing that with this offensive line.
Looking at the defense, though, for Denver, I believe they have the 6th fewest points allowed in the entire league.
Yeah.
They actually have played okay.
And Joseph.
Against Seattle and Tampa Bay, too. Those aren't passing games to shake a stick at. Surtain's the big name.
They allowed 20 points over the last 2 weeks.
That's pretty good. But they also have what an improvement Zach Allen has made after going to Denver.
Yeah.
We got our old buddy John Franklin Myers, who's over there.
I believe he missed one game with a concussion. I don't know if he played last week.
No, he played in all of them.
Okay. Really?
Jonathan Cooper went from a 7th-round pick to a guy who's probably going to get double-digit sacks this year and came close to it last year. Like, this is a real defense at real players. The problem, though, and this is where the Jets can exploit it, because it's not going to be just throw to Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson's going to have Pat Surtain on him. So he may have 3-4 catches this game. You got to prepare for that. I think this could be a big Tyler Conklin game.
Ooh, yeah.
Because Alex Singleton, who's probably their best linebacker and probably one of their top 3 defensive players, he tore his ACL. So he's out for the year. By the way, he tore his ACL in the Bucs game, and he played the rest of the game.
Insane, dude.
With a torn. I feel bad complaining about my arm now because I sure as hell ain't doing that. So this is going to have to be another Tyler Conklin, maybe even Lazard over the middle. Maybe Breece Hall has like 6-7 catches this game.
Sure.
Because as much as they want to get Garrett Wilson right, I don't think this is the game to get Garrett Wilson right. And trying to force it in there against Surtain, I don't think necessarily is going to be the best way for them to move the ball. But I think Rodgers knows that.
I think Denver sneakily has one of the best cornerback rooms in the NFL. It's outside of Pat Surtain, because obviously everyone knows Pat Surtain is great. But Riley Moss has had a very good start to the season as well. And Jaquan McMillan is probably one of the more underrated nickel corners in the NFL too. Their secondary is good. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to attack these corners in the way that they did against, the non-Christian Gonzalez corners in New England and even, against Tennessee. It's going to have to be stuff like that. And losing Singleton is a big loss because that linebacker room outside of him is not particularly encouraging. Cody Barton, who they only recently signed, I think Justin Strnad, is that his name, right? The former fifth round pick. He might start. They also have Christian Welch, who's a former Raven. They just signed Quan Alexander, former Jet, and Zach Cunningham. A blast from the past.
Still playing Zach Cunningham?
They just signed both of them to their practice squad. I don't imagine they're going to play this week. Maybe one of them gets elevated or something, but it'd be a quick turnaround. But that linebacker room is really hurting. So I think attacking the middle of this defense, whether that's on the ground, because I still think the interior of this Broncos defense can maybe be run on. They have DJ Jones, who we've talked about as a potential Jets target in the past, played under Robert Saleh in San Francisco. Good nose tackle. John Franklin Myers is there. Zach Allen has been really good to start the year, but the middle of the defense doesn't concern me as much as I think. Zach Allen is more of a 3-4 end, but he's been very good as a pass rusher as well. Nick Benito's a good player. Jonathan Cooper has really come on the last couple of years, and then their corners are good. So I think attacking the middle of this defense makes sense, but I don't think this is going to be a situation where they're dropping 30 points on this defense, because the Broncos do have a very good defense, and they have been very good the last couple of weeks. The only reason they even allowed 26 in week 1 is because the offense was so bad and just kept putting them in poor situations. So this is one of the better defenses in the NFL. I don't expect this to be a cakewalk for the Jets offense, even if this is the game we hope the Jets should handily win, especially after what they just did to New England on Thursday.
Well, looking at that offense too, this is where I'll agree with the Bo Nix defenders. Outside of Cortland Sutton, Josh Reynolds has been pretty good to start the year, but he's Josh Reynolds.
Yeah.
There's really not anybody.
Troy Franklin he's done nothing. He's been their Malachi Corley, Troy Franklin.
Which is weird because he was Bo Nix's teammate. You'd think they would have really good chemistry. Devon Vale is a 27-year-old rookie wide receiver. What is with the Broncos and the old rookies, man?
Sean Payton. I don't know, man.
Vale is going to be 27. Marvin Mims doesn't really play at all.
Nope.
Lil Jordan Humphrey.
He's their number 3. He starts for them, Lil Jordan Humphrey.
Yeah,
that's another Saint guy for Sean Payton, former Saint.
And then also you get Mike Williams, who, as Brian points out, has had some success in his career against Denver.
Hell yeah.
With the Chargers. Even if Nix plays okay, because I think this, as we mentioned before, this is the defense where, methodical, pick them apart, take your time. Maybe Sean Payton moves the ball against them. I just don't for them to have a really big game. Mm-hmm. They need Cortland Sutton to go off on Sauce. And they need Josh Reynolds to go off on DJ Reed.
I don't
need to not have Javonte Williams run for 20 yards against a defensive line that is really playing really well right now, especially Quinnen Williams. So I don't really see those things happening.
I think the most success the Broncos might have in this game is Bo Nix running. I always cringe whenever the Jets play a quarterback that can scramble and make a lot of plays with his legs, because this defense has historically struggled against quarterbacks that can do that, because they're just so aggressive. They're so overly aggressive, and it works in their favor a lot. But then, they'll send 6 guys or 4 guys, whatever, and the D lineman will be getting way upfield. And then if you don't sack Bo Nix first chance he might be running for some plays. So they did a better job of it the last couple of weeks, because they were spying a good amount too. which again, that was one of Will McDonald's sacks where he was just spying, and I think Will McDonald's a perfect guy to spy with. Obviously, you want him rushing the passer, but he's just so fast and so quick, and also a pretty good.
He would have, if he was born like 30 years ago, he would have been like a linebacker, like a middle linebacker.
Maybe. He's still a little like thin for a linebacker, which is so weird to say for an edge rusher. But I also think having Jamie and Sherwood in the middle of that defense is huge with that too, because he's been a very, very sure-handed tackler. But that would
Mosley not going to play this week either.
We'll see. Mosley is going to be a game time decision. It sounds like he did not practice yesterday. I don't think the practice report has come out today. That might be a better indicator. If he is limited today, that's a good sign for him playing. Right now, I'm going to assume he doesn't, because I think they're just going to kind of play it safe with him. No reason to rush him back. You have Jamie and Sherwood is playing at a high level. You don't really need to worry about Mosley rushing him back if he's not ready. But that would be my one concern about how the Broncos might be able to move the ball in this game. I'm not particularly concerned about Bo Nix picking apart the defense in the air. It's more so on the ground. But even that said, man, I will do our predictions in a sec. This is a game the Jets need to win. Like the narrative around this team will change a lot if they lose this game.
Especially because that schedule, I thought it was easier than it was, because Minnesota looks good as hell. That is not like just beat up on Sam Darnold anymore. That defense is ferocious.
Talk about NFC contenders. I mean, who's to say they're not one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFC right now? They should.
Not if they keep this up. And then you get Buffalo, who probably has been the best team in the league in the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Josh Allen's probably going to win MVP if he keeps this up.
Sean McDermott, maybe coach of the year. I mean, obviously, Kevin O'Connell as well is in that kind of conversation. But
McDermott, too, really, after that whole 9/11 story, like the comeback he's been on.
Yeah, it turns out just being good at football and good at coaching is, that'll change the narrative real quick.
My dad went to William & Mary, and so does Sean McDermott. So when that story came out, I'm like, oh, what's going on with your William & Mary alums here?
Oh, boy.
Although Mike Tomlin went there, too. So.
Hey, McDermott's fantastic.
And then they play Mike Tomlin after that.
That's
with
true.
The Steelers in prime time. That defense looks good.
Honestly,
I don't think Justin Fields is a particularly great quarterback, but he's making enough plays. Like,
that's 3 of the best coach teams in the NFL in a row.
Boom, boom, boom.
Right, because Minnesota, you got Brian.
After that, I think it's the Patriots after that. No, it's the Patriots, and then Thursday night they play the Texans.
It's the Texans, another well-coached team. Another very well-coached team.
That is a tough. Now it gets easier. The schedule does at the end of the year, because they play the beat to hell Dolphins twice. The Jags are a mess. Mm-hmm. The Seahawks, the Colts, the Cardinals. Like, it gets easier after that, but you really got to get through a lot of tough teams. So if you go into that 2-2, I could see why you'd be a little nervous.
These are going to be. These are a lot of teams the Jets, I think, are similarly in talent level too, and maybe even a little bit better. But it's going to be games where Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, Jeff Ulbrich, they need to earn their money. Like, they need to earn their keep and prove that they can coach with the best of them, because they were firmly outcoached in week 1. Firmly, like they were coached circles around the entire coaching staff. It's been different the last couple of weeks, but also they're coaching against, Brian Callahan, a first-time head coach, and then Gerard Mayo, who another first-time head coach who's working with very little in terms of talent. Very different situation when you're going against coaching Kevin O'Connell, who is probably the front runner for coach of the year right now. Mike Tomlin, who is one of the best coaches, maybe of all time, like definitely of his era. He is one of the best coaches in the league. Sean McDermott, if it's not Kevin O'Connell, he's probably coach of the coach of the year candidate. So you're going to really have to earn your keep if you're the Jets coaching staff over the next few weeks. As Ryan Olsen says, this is a classic trap game. It is. It absolutely is. There's no.
Especially with the long layoff, but
yes, for sure.
Prediction time. I'm now 3-0, Justin 2-1. Just going to say that.
I'm cool with that. I'm happy with that.
But I'm going to predict a Jets win. I'm going to say Jets 28, Broncos 14. Because unless the offense completely melts down, which I don't think will happen, this game will depend. And I think Rodgers going to get a couple scores because Aaron Rodgers. That would require like 3 long, methodical touchdown drives from Bo Nix at least on the road, which I just don't see that happening right now. Maybe if they got him next year and Bo Nix is a little more just in tune with the speed of the game, I could see it. But this is a tough ask for any quarterback, especially if your 4th career start and you still haven't thrown a touchdown pass. It would be very Jets if they did not win, but everything – the way I see it is pointing towards a Jets win.
They should be. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say Jets win. I always there's always like a little voice in the back of my head yelling at me every time I pick the Jets to win with one of these, but I can't in good conscience not pick them to win here. They're just a far superior team, and they should win this game. I'll say a little bit more low scoring. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Again, I just can't pick a Jets blowout. But I'll say 17-10. I think both defenses show up. Both defenses play very well. I think Bo Nix has a bit of a step back after his last game. I think the Jets defense gives him fits and blitzes the hell out of him, and I think forces him into some mistakes. But I also think the Jets offense takes a bit of a step back and maybe struggles a bit against the Broncos defense that is probably the best that they've faced so far. I mean, maybe it's even better than San Francisco. It's both of them have very good defenses. So I don't think it's going to be an easy matchup at all for the offense. So I'll say 17-10. It's a tight game. It's a little bit more tight than we would want it to be, kind of like that Tennessee game. But at the end, the Jets pull out a win, and they're 3-1, and we're all happy. That's my prediction.
I'm just a little more optimistic because I feel like outside of the Patriots can run the ball a little better, I feel like we were saying a lot of the same things about the Patriots before.
We were, but again, it's the classic trap game. I'm glad you mentioned that they have the 10 days off because I think that might work against them. At least if we're basing it off of previous Robert Saleh teams. It seems like they always have a letdown after coming off a longer break. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this Jets team,
that Zach Wilson.
Maybe this Jets team truly is different. And if they go out and blow out the Broncos again, like consecutive blowout wins over teams they should have blown out, I will have probably a different approach with this team moving forward, and I'll be thinking differently. But it's almost like a fool me once, fool me twice situation. Like you fool me once, like okay, they blew out the Patriots. All right, I believe it, but I'm not ready to fully believe this yet. Blow out the Broncos again, and then then maybe I'll start buying in. I'll feel maybe that little voice in the back of my head will fade away. That's
with that, thank you for tuning into the Jet Press Podcast. You can find us on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get them. We are there, and we're on YouTube, liking the stream, subscribing. Both of those things are actually huge helps. They help pump us up that YouTube algorithm. As we get a couple more predictions in here. Ryan Olson says Jets win 2017, slow start and fend off a late game rally. I could see that happening.
Yep.
And Brian Sternbeck, 24-16 Jets. So it seems like we're all kind of in the same ballpark. I think maybe I think I had 28-14, but I don't know. Like with how Rodgers performed last week, if he's still Aaron Rodgers and there's still some of that left in there, I think that's just still such a force multiplier. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Justin, any final words on our special Thursday matinee show?
I appreciate everybody joining us. It is a different time, so anybody taking the time out of their day to join us today and this Thursday, it's been great. And yeah, we went a week without talking about the Jets, man. This was weird. Now we're gonna have another show coming up on Sunday.
We weren't stewing in anger after they lost to Desmond Ritter 12-7.
That was such an enjoyable 10 days because we had 10 days to savor a blowout victory over a division rival on primetime television. That was great. And hopefully we're celebrating again the next time we talk on Sunday. Thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike on Twitter at @ByMikeLuciano. Follow me on Twitter, Justin T. Freed. Follow the Jet Press at the Jet Press. Download the Jet Press podcast wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, hit that notification bell. You guys know what to do. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Normally, it will be back to Wednesday next week and live immediately following every single Jets game. Thank you all for listening to Jet Press Podcast. I've been Justin Freed. That has been Mike Luciano. We'll see you guys on Sunday.
See you folks after the Broncos game.